The second thing he learned was what he was doing to try to help them was not working. Get right with God, you'll be able to quit drinking. He had the cart in front of the horse. You have to quit drinking to get right with God because the drinking is what had separated you. And it was Dr. Silkworth who said to him, well, Bill, the next drunk you talk to, instead of using that approach, why don't you use the scientific approach? I'm a doctor. I truly believe that it is something inside of your body that is wrong, that makes you drink the way you do and doesn't make others drink that way. Some people can have one or two and quit. You have one and the compulsion to have another one is set up. That's why in AA they teach it's the first drink that gets you drunk. It doesn't make you drunk, it sets up the compulsion to keep drinking that gets you there. And as Divine Providence would have it, the next drunk he talked to was a man with a scientific background, a physician. You see, after 6 months of sobriety, Bill was beginning to be trusted in the financial community. And he was working and working very hard, and he had a deal set up in Akron, Ohio, and he had backers. And he went to carry it out. The deal fell through. He was staying at the Mayflower Hotel, and he was terribly discouraged. It was his first big break after being a little bit sober. And here it was, it just collapsed under him. Well, what do addicted people think of when they hit anything unpleasant? It's anything that will relieve the unpleasantness. And everything in him wanted to drink, but there were no groups for him to go to. AA hadn't started yet. He was the one who was about to bring it into being. However, never knock physical sobriety. I've heard this too often in AA. Oh yeah, well he ain't drinking, but he ain't sober. He just got physical sobriety. Don't knock that. Bill's brain was alcohol-free long enough for him to realize that a drink would be fatal. He's in the lobby of that hotel and he could hear the ice cubes clinking against the glasses in the bar. Everything in him wanted a drink. That is normal for the alcoholic. But this was physically sober long enough to say, hey, Bunky, I know you want to drink, but you and I also know what it would lead to. You really don't want to. Run. Run. And he ran to the church bulletin. And he picked a name, T-U-N-K-S, of Father Tunks, an Episcopal priest. Called him on the phone. What was the only thing that had helped Bill not to drink when he wanted to drink? He reached out and tried to help somebody else. Well, here he is in Akron, Ohio. He didn't know any drunks there. So he called this Episcopal priest, and he said, again, I wasn't standing beside him, I'm making this up. He said, look, I am not crazy. Don't hang the phone up. You may think I'm nuts when I ask you this question. Do you know a drunk I can talk to? I wonder how many people have ever been asked that question. Hi there, you know a drunk I can talk to? Well, you know what you're liable to think of someone who calls with a question like that. So I don't believe it is very surprising that the man said no. I mean, why should he give names? I'm sure he knew a lot of people had trouble with their drinking, but why give those names to a stranger over the phone? So he said, no, I don't. And Bill said, do you know anybody who are members of the Oxford groups? And he gave him 10 names. And Bill struck out on the first 9. Do you know a drunk I can talk to? And the 10th person was Henrietta Seiberling. Her family used to make automobile tires. She said yes, an old family friend. And he said, well, let me speak with him. She said, I can. He's just too drunk. Can I meet him tomorrow? Come on over to my place, and I'll introduce you. And she introduced Bill Wilson to Dr. Bob Smith, and AA was born in her kitchen. And this is the way it started. Bill Wilson approached that doctor in a way that he had never been approached before. Hey, look, I hear you're having trouble with your drinking. Well, yes, I am. He's shaken to pieces. He said, have you been here, you've been there, done this, done that, treated yourself, been to other doctors, been to psychiatrists? Yes. And he said, here you are. And then he said, and this is the essence of AA therapy, let me tell you what happened to me. And he shared the entire lifetime of his drinking experience. And Dr. Bob was so moved by that. He had never been approached that way before, not by anyone. And then he dumped the sum total of his drinking experience on the table with it. And ladies and gentlemen, out of that pile of the rubble of 2 human lives, they discovered certain things they had in common. Number 1, when they drank, they did not control it, it controlled them. So it doesn't make any difference what you drink, how much you drink, what kind you drink, what time of day you drink, with whom you drink. All we have to do is answer this single question: when you drink, what happens? Do you control it, or does it control you? I always ask our patients, have you ever, in the secrecy of your own heart, ever wondered whether or not you're drinking too much or drugging too much? Those stark little islands of honesty that hit us. And the second thing, it caused problems in my life. And they all had a slew of them. Bill had been knocked out of work, unemployable. Dr. Bob, unable to practice medicine, couldn't be trusted to do anything. And they all traced it back to the drinking. And so they began. AA is clinging to another alcoholic and sharing your drinking life with him. That's the essence of it. What it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Now, in the beginning, Bill had a lifetime of drinking and 6 months of sobriety to share. Dr. Bob had a lifetime of drinking and maybe 6 hours of sobriety. Obviously, then, in the beginning, there was more emphasis on the drinking part of one's life because that was the major part of one's life. What is it like now? Bill had to tell him about the 6 months of sanity that he was enjoying. And then they grabbed a hold of another alcoholic and another. All right, so in the beginning, as we know, looking back over the 12 steps as printed now that we have at our disposal, we can see that the 12 steps patch up after we are liberated from the compulsion to drink alcohol. They patch up the 3 relationships that were shattered by the addiction, with God, with self, and with neighbor. And so Dr. Bob summarized these 12 steps in 6 words. Trust God, steps 1, 2, and 3. I can't handle it, God can, I think I'll get in touch. Part 2, clean house. That straightens me out with myself. Steps 4 through 11. An inventory, an admission of guilt, a willingness to get rid of the bad, asking God to help, a willingness to make amends in doing it, a continuing to examine self, to admit promptly what goes wrong so that there's no longer a backlog of guilt building up to a drunk, and a desire to deepen my relationship with the God to whom I attribute my sobriety through prayer. Now, all of this creates a gigantic change in personality, and now the third relationship, help others, step 12. Now, the addicted person is capable of doing what God created him to do, to love by sharing sobriety. The paradox of recovery, Bill had to start with step 12 in order to discover the other 11. What did they discover in these 12 principles? Absolutely nothing new. What they did, through sheer experience, put the stamp of validation on a set of principles that God created when He created humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, my mother lived AA. Never heard of it. She lived it. And basically that's, I hope, that's what you try to teach your children. Trust God, clean house, help others. And this is all they had to offer other drunks that they went out to help. And the steps only came into being a little bit at a time. Do you know why 4 and 5 occur where they do? After a very short time of sobriety, Dr. Bob went on a medical convention and drank. And he shot back home. And 4 and 5, an inventory of our moral lives and an admission of what went wrong in order to resolve the guilt, he found it to be absolutely essential if he was going to stay sober. He said, I cannot live sober with unresolved guilt in my life. So it all came about through experiencing things. And 4 years later, they were able to write these things with words. I was privileged to meet Bill Wilson once. I attended a clergy conference on alcoholism in New York City, and Austin Ripley, who had already spent a year of his life with Bill and Dr. Bob, was able to get Bill to come down and address these priests. And he told his story, and there was a question period afterwards. One of his dearest, closest friends was a Jesuit priest, Father Eddie Dowling. And the day that Bill came to talk to us, he had just returned days before from Father Dowling's funeral, and he stood at the podium and just wept like a child. They were the closest of friends. But anyway, one of the priests asked him, he said, Bill, since the 12 steps of recovery from the horror of addiction are so closely allied and so parallel to the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order of priests, is it true that a Jesuit wrote the 12 steps? And Bill smiled. He said, no, Father. He said, I wrote the steps. He said, it took me about a half hour because he said when it came time for publication, I took everything, all of the wisdom that we were trying to function by, and I think he said it was about 30 to 36 paragraphs, and he said I had to condense them to put them into print, and it came out in those 12 lines. That was 1939, 4 years after Bill and Dr. Bob had met, and they published the big book. And the organization, Alcoholics Anonymous, then took its name from the title of the big book. It was the big book's title that gave the name to the fellowship. If there's anyone here with a scientific bent, or I love that, he is of a scientific bent, or background, let this be remembered. The 12 principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, by which the people who try to live them get sober and stay sober, over the 60 years of its existence, with a couple of million of screwballs fooling around with them, not one word has been changed. That should say something to the scientific community. Even scientists are constantly revising their theoretical statements. Even the big book, when they say a revised edition, the only part revised are the stories at the end. They just drop some and bring new ones in. The text remains. It is written in the past tense. This is not theoretical. This is what we did to get what we've got. And so it's written in the past tense. This is what we did. This has been proven. And as it has been passed on, even from nation to nation, it is still as effective as when it started. Now, we come to 1995. We have the phenomenon of treatment. We have treatment centers. There are some. This Austin Ripley founded a place just for alcoholic priests, and I have visited there many, many, many times. I did get to know Rip very well. His concept of treatment, time is of the essence of recovery, time. And so his notion was 3 months minimum. You went home when he felt you were able to go home. Doc Green, a little old recovered alcoholic doctor, he taught the patients there what was wrong with them. He gave a series of lectures using the most brilliant and simplest language to explain alcoholism, one of the mysteries of the ages. And yet, the Chalk Talk is based on his lectures. In the times I was there, I used to take notes from the lectures that I was privileged to hear. And I've often asked patients, when you walk out of seeing the Chalk Talk, did this thought hit you? My gosh, all that was so simple, why didn't I know it? Why didn't I know it? It's an ABC. Basic. Basic notions. And Rip used to explain to his patients, Alcoholics Anonymous, which was the way in which they were to get well. That should be the backbone of all treatment. It should be. Today we get a month at most. Today we have this managed care. A managed care executive died and got to the gates. And he asked St. Peter, he said, "Did I make it?" Peter said, "You sure did. Come on in. We'll give you 6 days."